Can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay, thanks. We have new technology tonight. We're trying to up our game. So, welcome. Thanks for coming. This is the art mixer for the Overton County Arts Council. I apologize for my voice. I don't know what's going on. I'm not sick. I just lost my voice yesterday morning, and this is as good as it gets. So I'll be brief. I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank the Clark House for the amazing food tonight. I want to thank Bobby Moore for doing all the flower arrangements, beautiful flower arrangements. Wonderful job. I want to thank Mitchell White and all the volunteers for setting up the room. Those of you who've been to the chamber before, you know, it doesn't normally look this way. And it looks better tonight. So thanks to Mitchell and everybody who did that. Rachel and Haley especially, our interns. I want to mention a few quick things. As the Arts Council, our mission is to promote and cultivate and promote the visual arts in Overton County. We have second Saturday art classes. We have these mixers. We're going to try and do them on a monthly basis. We're not going to do it every month, but we're going to try. Then our big event in the fall is called Paint Livingston. It's a plein air painting competition. We're trying to get local artists, regional artists from throughout Tennessee and the Southeast to come and engage in a plein air painting competition for 3 days, be October 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So kind of put that in the back of your mind. Go to our website, overtoncountyarts.org, and learn about it. We hope you'll come to that as well. We hope that you'll please, many of you are members already. Thank you very much. Several of you are patrons. Thank you very much. Please consider becoming a member or a patron if you're not one already. And also please sign up for our monthly email newsletter, and we'll be getting out more information throughout the year. This will be a short presentation, about 30 minutes. We have a wonderful presenter here tonight and interviewer. It'll be about 20, 30-minute presentation. And then please stick around. There'll be plenty of food left, plenty of tasty beverages, and sparkling conversation, hopefully, if you don't talk to me. But please stick around. So our presenter tonight is Dr. Carol Ventura. She's a retired art history professor at Tennessee Tech. She has a fascinating biography and has done many things. And I encourage you to corner her after her talk and ask her about all the fascinating things she's done in her life. But she is here to talk about Van Gogh tonight. Our interviewer is Dr. Luke Anderson. He's an instructor at Tennessee Tech and a wonderful guy. So I'm going to hand the mic to Dr. Luke Anderson and get out of the way.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight. We want to start because everyone's probably familiar with Van Gogh being a painter, but I find it really interesting that we almost didn't get Van Gogh the painter, and he almost had a very different career. So tell us a little bit about his background and how we almost never got Van Gogh the painter.
Well, he was born to an upper middle-class family of Protestant ministers in Holland. And he began working at his uncle's art gallery when he was just 16 years old. But he didn't really have the personality to be an art dealer, so that didn't last too long. So then he thought he would, give the ministry a try. So he went to a town of coal miners in Belgium, which is right next to Holland. But instead of living in the really nice quarters that the ministers had, he decided he wanted to live more like the people, like the poor people. And unfortunately, the people didn't respond to that, and they made fun of him, and the kids made fun of him, and so he ended up losing that job too. So he was only about 27 when he decided to become a painter. And he saw it as a spiritual kind of ministry himself, and he knew it would require sacrifices. And throughout his short career, his 10-year career, he did exhibit with other artists, but he sold one painting in his during his entire career, unless you count the paintings that he traded for rent or, other things like that.
Wow, so we almost had Van Gogh the minister
Right.
instead, and then he sold one painting in his
Just
entire life.
one.
So
Yeah.
all of you who have sold more than one, you beat Vincent Van
Right.
Gogh. So that's really encouraging, right? So, Adrian Stone, Mitch White, others, good job. You're doing great. So how did Van Gogh get started in art? You said he was 27. So how did he get
Right.
his beginning?
Well, fortunately, he had a very supportive brother, Theo, and we'll hear more about him. So he had that support. But he actually started drawing when he was doing his ministry with the coal miners. And we see in his work his interest for the people, because that's his subject matter. You don't see kings and queens in Van Gogh's work. You see wood choppers, or we'll see potato, the next one, the potato eaters. He chose very down to earth, literally down to earth subjects to paint.
Well, how was his concern for the poor reflected in his art? You mentioned the potato
Okay.
eaters, which is up
Right.
here now. So
Well, his subject matter, but also he used, dark colors, kind of depressing colors. A lot of people, when I used to teach art history, I'd put this up and I'd say, who do you think painted this? Nobody would guess Vincent Van Gogh, because his early work was very dark like this. And so he said about this, because Theo would send him money, and then he would, send back his artwork with letters. And in fact, those letters are really insightful. So in one of the letters, he says, I've tried to make it clear how these people eating their potatoes under the lamplight have dug the earth with these very hands they put in the dish. I'm not at all anxious for everyone to like or admire it at once. And of course, nobody liked it but Theo. But he shows the different generations. There's young and old, kind of showing that this is going to be their life, and also how people stick together, and the fact that they're breaking bread, kind of like if you think of the Last Supper, with Christ, breaking bread with the poor. And in his early work, we still see although we don't see the bright colors, we still see the brush strokes, the thick paint, a very expressionist kind of style that actually influenced a lot of later painters.
you mentioned the family in this piece, and I know that he has a very interesting past. So can you tell us a little bit about his family and actually some almost scandalous things about his romantic life?
Poor Vincent, I think
Poor guy.
he really wanted to be with people. He wanted to have friends, but his personality just didn't help him out at all. And he fell in love twice, but unfortunately the women rejected him. And he kind of went about it
We've all been
odd.
there, right?
Yeah. And so then he started living with a pregnant prostitute, and they, things were working out, but his family was really pressuring him to
They were unhappy about him living
right.
with?
They weren't happy. So succumbing to family pressure, he moved out, and then he moved to Paris to be with his brother Theo. And he lived with Theo for a short time, but then they kind of didn't get along so good. And
Siblings, yeah.
right. So so he moved to southern France. And fortunately, Theo sent him money, gave him a living allowance. And he was, quite happy for a while. He actually wanted to start an artist commune, which didn't, work out. But he did get one painter, we'll see, Paul Gauguin,
Yes.
for a short time. Yeah.
Well, thankfully he had Theo, who was a really important patron, and the power of art a lot of times comes from the power of the patrons that support the artist. Right. And so we hope that's why all of you are going to support the arts in this area, right?
Yeah.
But with the financial and emotional support coming from his brother, then what did he start focusing on in his art at that point?
Well, his work is about the human struggle, and it's actually very spiritual. I mentioned that he, tried his hand at the ministry, but he wasn't really enthusiastic about organized religion. but we still see in this painting of the potato eaters, it's kind of hard to see, but in the upper left, there's a cross there. And you see in the background, he has that religious feeling, but actually his work is a lot more spiritual. And there's a real difference between spiritual and religious, because religious paintings, they're meant to inspire us and to give us answers, to our questions. But spiritual painting is actually more about questioning. Why are we here? What's going on? It's more questioning, and that's what in a lot of his work it is very spiritual. And he was also interested. He did a little bit of research into other religions like Buddhism and some of those other religions too.
So what else besides religion influenced or shaped his artwork?
Well, I guess this need of his need to paint was like his religion. And, it filled that part of his soul, like religion did with some people.
Yeah, and we see here a few other paintings that kind of show he was introduced to Japanese prints, right?
Well, Japanese prints, when he discovered Japanese prints, this is actually a woodblock print. And they were very popular in the late 1800s when the port of Japan had opened. And little aside is the Europeans were very interested in porcelain. So they were importing all this porcelain. And the Japanese prints were like newspaper that they wrapped around all the porcelain so it wouldn't break. And then Europeans discovered the beauty of the Japanese prints. So people like Van Gogh bought them. And that's when we started to see this really bright color. What he also liked was the high viewpoint, that kind of the cutoff composition, and the imaginative perspective. So he copied some of the prints that he owned, and that's what we see, his version on the right, and then the original on the left. But what Van Gogh did is he didn't use just solid color like we see in the print. If you look at his paintings, he always has a little bit of one color next to another color. And so I went, I've taken a lot of groups to Europe, and for one of them, we went to Amsterdam and we went to the Van Gogh Museum. And not only did I get to see a lot of beautiful Van Gogh paintings, but they had a little room with the Japanese prints that he collected. And I'm walking through the museum and I see this little box of yarn balls. And they were every ball had two colors in it. And it wasn't the original box of yarn balls, but they used, they could see what colors they were. And they reproduced it. So I reproduced it here. I'm just going to throw these out and look at them. They're going to move. It just pass them around. So look at them, because those are actually made from yarn that I spun and dyed. So those would have been.
Because she can do everything.
Oh.
That's why.
But those are the colors that that would have been available back then, the naturally dyed colors. But isn't it a great way to figure out your color combinations? So when you look at those balls, when we get to the painting Starry Night, I chose the colors from Starry Night. Yeah. And we're going to see the light blue with dark blue, the orange with the yellow. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and you can even see it in the one that you did.
Right.
As well, so.
We'll get to that in a minute. Yeah.
So you mentioned Starry Night. I'm assuming that there are a few paintings that most of us are probably familiar with. When I think of Van Gogh, I think of like the sunflowers or the cafe or the bedroom painting, right? So what can you tell us about some of these paintings that are really famous that we might not already know about them?
Well, in 1888, that's when he moved to southern France. And of course, the light there was brighter, and there were lots of fields of sunflowers and other plants. So that helped brighten his palette too. But he often would paint the same painting, several times. So we have several of these sunflower paintings. And he worked very quickly in a technique called wet on wet, because before Van Gogh, the painters would work in layers, and it was very careful, and you couldn't see the brush strokes, and a lot of times they looked like photographs. But he took the paint kind of like we do today and just, put it on there. But he had to do it very quickly before the flowers wilted.
Yeah.
So it also, encouraged him to be quick, but it's very expressive. And again, that spontaneity comes through. And that was also what was so influential for, later artists. And also, a lot of times he would paint what he felt, not what he saw. So he wasn't taking pains to get every little petal just right, but.
Yeah. Well, you feel the force of it, right? There's an emotion in the expression to it. And it is more about feel than accuracy.
Right.
For sure. Yeah. Well, we also have other paintings as well that he is famous for, like the Night Cafe, or this one here. What can you tell us about the Night Cafe?
Well, he actually painted from life. This one, he stayed up at night. Back then, if you were a homeless person, you would go to a bar and sleep there, like these people did.
Yeah.
And he wasn't, really crazy about the whole atmosphere, but he ended up trading this with the proprietor for his rent. So I'm assume the proprietor said, hey, paint my bar. And but you kind of get Van Gogh's uneasy feeling about this bar with the kind of colors he chose. The people kind of passed out, not a whole lot going on. What's interesting, though, is how he treated the lights. We're going to see the same kind of halo effect in the Starry Night when we look at that. But it wasn't meant to be a descriptive scene at all, as you can see from what he wrote about it to his brother.
Yeah, where it says, I've tried to express the idea that the cafe is a place where one can ruin oneself, go mad, or commit a crime. So I've tried to express, as it were, the powers of darkness in a low public house by soft Louis XV green and malachite contrasting with yellowish green and harsh blue greens. And all this in an atmosphere like a devil's furnace of pale sulfur.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, we also see the bedroom. That's a very famous painting that we all might be familiar with as well. Perhaps the most famous story that we know about Van Gogh, right, is that he cut off his own ear, right? You've all heard that probably. Now, what I love about you is you have your own interesting theory about this. So tell us about that.
Okay. Well, my theory is, I mentioned how Van Gogh wanted to start an artist colony, but the only person he could convince to come was the painter Paul Gauguin. And Paul Gauguin was, very talented, but hard drinking, and as was Van Gogh. And so things started out really well with them, and they would paint together. In fact, there are paintings that Gauguin did a Van Gogh painting, his sunflowers, in fact. And sometimes they even painted the same subject, and they did it very quickly. But after a while, this seems to be par for the course with Vincent. After a while, things don't work out. And in Gauguin and Van Gogh's case, they would fight. I mean, really argue and fight. And they were actually fighting over a woman, I think.
Of course.
And so my theory is that Gauguin accidentally cut Van Gogh's ear off. He probably hit him on the head with a beer bottle or something like that. Yeah. And the thing about Van Gogh is he was not a vengeful person. I think how sometimes victims feel like, oh, it's my fault, and what did I do to? Yeah. And so I think he didn't want to get Gauguin in trouble, because the whole thing is so weird, and it adds to the the craziness. Oh, Van Gogh, he cut his ear off, But I do think it was actually an accident. And Gauguin left right after that. They parted. And so that's my theory. It was an accident.
Well, we see that he painted himself,
Right.
after that.
Right. He did a lot of self-portraits, especially toward the end of his life. So here we see him with the bandaged ear, and in the background, a Japanese print, because this is his house. And then if you notice in the paintings without the bandage, he always has that side of his head now, because he's not going to show that.
He's got to get his good side.
Yeah. He had a good side after that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I took painting 1 at Tennessee Tech. And we had to choose an artist and reproduce their work. And I chose this particular piece by Van Gogh. And really the best way to really study an artist is to try to reproduce what they did. And this is where I really realized he never put 2 brushstrokes together of the same color.
Yeah.
And and also I realized how time consuming this was. And his paintings, some of them are quite large, but yeah, and I really got into all the swirls and all of that. And so this is something else. I don't know. Some of you look like you might be over 60. Do you know that you can enroll at Tennessee Tech for free if you're over 60? So, yeah, I've been taking all kinds of classes. It has to be the semester-long class if there's room. And you just have to enroll once as a non-traditional student. And
Wow.
yeah, so
That's cool.
I've taken all kinds of classes at the Craft Center, at Tech. This was a free class.
Good
So,
to know.
yeah, so anyway.
Yeah. Well, so maybe his most famous painting is Starry Night. And what I find really interesting about this painting in particular that is like almost just ubiquitous now, where we see it everywhere. We see it on tote bags, we see it on purses, we see it, this was painted in a really unusual place.
Yeah.
So tell us about that I bet most of you don't realize.
Well, we don't know what really plagued Vincent Van Gogh. We know he had some issues. And so he checked himself into a sanitarium. And it was when he was a patient there that he painted Starry Night. And remember when I said, remember how these lights look in the night cafe? Look at his stars and the lights. And so this has a real sense of movement. It's a clear night and all the swirling and movements happening in the sky. And then that contrast to the calm, village below. And you do see a little bit of his religious background coming through with the church, but also look at the very central swirls. Doesn't that look like the yin yang, symbol?
Mm-hmm.
He really painted what he felt. I'm sure, things did not look like that. And in fact, Gauguin, the person he admired, criticized his work. But fortunately, Theo and Theo's wife, appreciated his work. The problem with Van Gogh is he was really ahead of his time. And he did influence a lot of people afterward. But it really reflects the spiritual and mystical found in nature. So in those balls of yarn, I passed around the colors of the green cedars, and then the moon, which kind of looks like the sun, yellow and orange, and then the blues, light blue, dark blue. So anyway.
When I was teaching high school, I would use this painting as a free write prompt, and I would have students write about what they felt and what they saw and what they experienced from this. And it was fascinating because none of them would ever write the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many different reactions to this painting in particular, which I think really speaks to the expressionism that you were talking about, where it's more emotions that people feel and have strong reactions to it. And that was, I think, part of why he was so far ahead of his time, for sure. Well, what was his last painting that he ever did?
Okay. Excuse me. The last painting is this crows flying over a wheat field. And he was actually pretty depressed when he was painting this. He wrote to his brother, returning there, I set to work. The brush almost fell from my hands. I had no difficulty in expressing sadness and extreme solitude. Now, this is supposedly the place where he shot himself in the abdomen. Because again, the famous story about Van Gogh is he cut his ear off and he committed suicide by shooting himself in the stomach. But there is some controversial evidence now, which I think is true, that Van Gogh did not commit suicide that way. In fact, if you're going to commit suicide, do you shoot yourself in the stomach? No. And it took him a couple days to die. He actually died in his brother's arms. But there, I won't get into the story, but somebody else probably accidentally shot him when he was trying to take the gun away from this person. There were young people in town that would go to southern France for vacation, and they were known to, carry around guns and play cowboy and stuff like that. And again, though, not wanting to get anyone in trouble, I think that's why he said he did it to himself. Because these same boys were the boys that would make fun of him and all that. And they never found the gun, and the town didn't really investigate. I think they were kind of relieved to get rid of this crazy guy, He didn't really dress up. If anything, he dressed down and, painted and, fought with Gauguin and hung out with the prostitutes. And, so there was really no investigation. But one of these boys, kind of on his deathbed, told somebody this. If you Google Van Gogh, you can read the whole thing. Anyway, to me, it does make sense that it was an accident. And in his 10 years of being an artist, he produced over 2,000 paintings and drawings, if you can imagine.
So many, yeah.
Yeah. But if not for his supportive brother and sister-in-law, we wouldn't be here talking about him right now.
Which is why being a patron of the arts is so important. And the correspondence I know that you have between he and his brother is really central to a lot of what we know about him.
There's like 1,000 letters. And yeah.
Well, if we are interested, as I'm guessing a lot of us are, in seeing his work for ourselves, which, as an aside, I would personally highly recommend you go see his work in person. The paint is so thick and so lively and so vibrant. To see it in person is very different than seeing it flat and two-dimensional ways. And so if you ever get a chance, it just is a totally different experience than seeing it like this. But if we want to see it, are there places nearby that we can see it, or where is the best collection, or how can we go experience it firsthand?
Well, a lot of the larger museums have examples of his work. So the Boston Museum of Fine Arts in New York, you can go to the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art. You have the Getty in LA. There's, the Phillips Collection in DC, the Art Institute of Chicago. But the largest collection is actually the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. And the prints and the paintings were actually all donated by Vincent's namesake, his nephew, the son of Theo. He donated the entire collection, and it's just wonderful. And you can see those yarn balls too.
Yeah. Anybody up for a field trip?
Yeah.
Right? Let's go. So as we close out, I like to ask this: what do you hope we remember most about Van Gogh?
Well, as I've alluded, Vincent really marched to the beat of his own drum. He was very different from other people. He, is very creative, and that creativity came through, but it really made people uneasy. So I hope the next time you see a crazy artist being themselves, that you will welcome their creativity and support them in memory of Vincent. That's what I hope.
That's lovely. And maybe ahead of their time, right?
Yeah, right.
So again, we want to mention that if you do have further questions and other things, we would love for you to come speak to Carol afterwards, because she's a wealth of knowledge, as you can see, about Van Gogh and many other things as well. We just want to thank you so much for your time today. And so let's give Carol a hand for please go get more drinks, food, and enjoy the rest of your evening.